Everyone. Hope you all are safe and healthy inside your homes. I'll touch upon what we do first and then talk about some housekeeping rules, since this may be the first VanQ webinar for some of you. So Optimus is a tech solutions company, and as more and more companies are digitally transforming themselves, especially now, what we are trying to do is offer the support and technology that they might need in their journey. We offer a wide variety of services such as cloud management, so things like cloud migration, architecture assessment, app development, application testing, and data and AI. You can check more on that on our website. We are a Microsoft partner, and we use Azure as our chosen platform for all cloud integrations. And we have been a gold partner for quite some time, and we have 7 gold competencies. We have 2 centers of operations. One is in Noida, India, and the other one is in Vancouver, obviously. And Vancouver is the headquarters. We also one of Canada's 500 fastest growing companies. So yeah, that was a little bit about us. Now, moving on to some housekeeping rules. Since this is a webinar and Jocelyn already sort of touched upon some of these points, ideally we would like everyone to sort of get to know each other a little bit. So it would be great if everyone can post like a short description or introduction of themselves. So your name, what do you do, what are you interested in, and who you're looking to connect with, along with your LinkedIn details. So if people want, they can connect with you after the webinar. I would also request you all, as Jocelyn mentioned earlier, to mute yourself if you haven't already. And you can ask your questions anytime during the presentation. You can either put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand within the chat so Jocelyn knows, Jocelyn can unmute you and you can ask your question. We are recording the presentation and we'll post the link, so you can always refer to it. So for our presentation today, we are really excited to have Alex from Tech Resources Limited, and he'll be presenting on what to cover in a Selenium coding test. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Alex.
Thank you.
I'll just stop sharing. There you go.
I'm assuming I should share, right?
Yes, you can take over now.
I still see myself.
We can see a screen now.
Okay, good. So honestly, I had the difficulty figuring out what is a good title for the presentation. Because initially I thought maybe it should be something like, what is a good Selenium test? And then I thought, okay, maybe that's not the best title. Then I thought maybe it should be named what is a good Selenium solution. And eventually I came up with this, like, what should a Selenium coding test cover? It's basically an attempt on explaining actually how good the Selenium coding exercise should be in order to have maximum chances of either going to the next phase of the interviewing or maybe even getting the job. So the first thing that I wanted to basically highlight is that in many cases, the difference between something really good and something just good is just attention to detail, right? Attention to detail meaning, not letting anything not covered, like taking care of everything, making sure everything is properly done, making sure everything is properly organized, everything is properly implemented. So I thought this quote is a good way of just introducing whatever will follow. Now we are all in the same situation, right? Everybody's working from home. Luckily, we are in the IT business and we can do that. But still, I think some topics come up again and again and again, and probably are important for everybody. And those topics are, will I be able to keep my job? And if not, will I be able to find a new job? It's a lot of uncertainty these days about how companies will manage, which companies will continue to do well, which companies will not do so well, how will they recover? And of course, companies not doing well means, job issues. So going forward, it's probably a good idea that everybody is focused more on finding a new job. And since we are talking about automation, I think we will just discuss about test automation jobs. The presentation is about Selenium interviewing exercises like coding tests, right? But I didn't want to make the presentation very generic. So I thought it's probably easier to follow if we just discuss about a specific language. So I just chose Java, not C# or something else. So everything that follows will basically be in Java. Now, many companies have test automation opportunities. They hire esthets or they hire manual testers that have automation experience. And typically for any new job, there are many resumes being submitted, like sometimes hundreds of them. And in these resumes, many people claim having Selenium test automation skills and Selenium test automation expertise. But the reality is that only a few have real and solid Selenium automation skills and expertise. Some people mention Selenium skills and programming skills because they think that that will help them being shortlisted. They hope that since a lot of companies and a lot of recruiters are searching for keywords, maybe if they have the keywords in the resume, that will be useful, and then their resume will be picked up from all of the resumes submitted. So some testers just, excuse me, just put the Selenium and Java or some other languages because they assume that that will be helpful for the keyword searches done by the companies and recruiters. Other testers have some experience. They may be part of a team that implemented Selenium automation, but they were not the ones writing the code, right? They were just the people who would execute tests, who would check every day if tests passed or failed, who would basically follow up on failed tests. And then other testers took online courses on Selenium, but then honestly, they don't have much experience working with it. So everybody that does this assumes that adding Selenium in the resume will be helpful in the sense that they will be picked up and then they will basically continue with the in-person interview. And that's basically a sample of such a resume. Of course, it's a bad idea to do something like this because the company will ask you to come for an interview, and then they will start asking you specific questions about Selenium, and then they will realize that actually, even if you claim that you have the experience, you don't have it. Again, the hope of testers who just mentioned Selenium and programming skills on the resume is that they will be shortlisted, and then once shortlisted, maybe they will be interviewed, and then who knows? Maybe in the interview they get lucky, right? Maybe the interview will be extremely easy. Maybe there will be no specific questions about programming, no specific questions about Selenium, and they will just get the job, right? And then the hope is, okay, maybe I'm getting lucky, maybe I will get the job, and then I will be able to learn what I need on the job. But then getting lucky is rare. And let's say it happens, the person will get hired, and then the company will ask him to basically start doing the work, right? And then since the tester that just got lucky doesn't know how, it won't be long until the company will realize that he cannot do it. He cannot do the work, right? And then they will realize, okay, hiring this person was actually not the best thing that we could do because he cannot do the work. And I know a few, excuse me, a few examples in this regard, like people that just got lucky and then they got hired, and then 2 or 3 months later they were again searching for another job. So getting lucky is not the way to basically get the test automation job. Having luck works better. And I know you will say lucky, what's the difference? But then if you define luck as the next slide, you will understand that why having luck works better, especially if you define luck in this way. Like luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, right? What this means to me is that you have to be prepared, very much prepared, very well prepared. And then when you get the opportunity for a new job that you prepared for, then you get that job, right? So luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Now, what happens is that companies interview lots and lots of testers for their openings. And then in the past, they would interview a few testers or maybe a lot of them, and then they would realize that none of them is the person that they need. And after doing this a while, the companies basically said, okay, we need to do something different because it's just a waste of time interviewing people that claim having the skills, but in reality, they don't have them. So they changed the process, the interviewing process a little bit, and they added automation coding tests that are similar to coding tests that are given to developers in many companies. When a developer is hired, one of the few things that he may have to do to get the job is he has to go through a coding test. So companies started using automation coding tests as well for automation jobs. And the best coding test for a test automation job is to ask the candidate to automate a real scenario for a public website. And of course, this exercise should show how good are the development skills and how good are the automation skills of the candidate. This is not an exercise to be done in 1 hour or in 2 hours. It's something that can be done over a few days. And then, if the solution is well done, then that may be the signal that the interviewing process should continue, or not. If the solution is not good, then most probably the interviewing process will be stopped. And this happened to me. It happened to me quite a few times. It happened to me last time when I applied for a job with Boeing. And that was quite funny because when I saw the interview that they asked me to, when I saw the exercise that they wanted me to complete, I thought that that's just insane. Still, I was interested in the job, and then I did my best, and they liked it. And then once I was hired, I realized that, they told me that actually by mistake, instead of sending me an exercise for the test automation job, they sent me the exercise for a development job. And I got also one of these coding tests when I was applying for a job in Best Buy a couple of years ago. And this is what Best Buy wanted me to do. They wanted a full automation project that automates the process of creating an order with one product. So basically, they wanted me to automate an end-to-end flow that would start by opening the homepage of bestbuy.ca and then searching on the homepage for a keyword. Then on results page, the test would have to select the product. On details page, the test would have to add the product to the cart. And then the test would have to continue until the last page where the user information would be filled in, the credit card information would be filled in, the delivery information would be filled in, but the credit card information should be wrong, right? And then the test should attempt at submitting the order and then just catch the error. That's what they wanted, a full test automation project that automates this flow end to end, and they wanted the project to be built with Selenium WebDriver and Java. And this was happening after the in-person interview. And I was pretty sure that if my solution was good, then the job was mine. So I put the time and effort into it, and time and effort meant a few days. I probably put like 3 or 4 days into this because I wanted the solution to be really high quality. The site at that time was not particularly easy to work with from an automation point of view because the HTML code of many elements was really not good. And the site had random pop-ups all over the place. On multiple pages, you would just have pop-ups coming up randomly. And then a lot of pages would use iframes and a lot of pages would use third-party components. These days, the site is much, much better. So what did my solution include, and what should any Selenium coding exercise include? Of course, I'm referring to the solution for a coding exercise, like the code that you will put together to address the exercise. And again, I'm going to try to go into technical details because I know that that's what everybody is interested in. But how good should the solution be in general? And I think this is how good it should be. I'm pretty sure you heard about Steve Martin. He's like a famous actor. And in his autobiography, which is like a really good book, he has this this thing that he says, be so good they can't ignore you. Meaning you should be so good that everybody should basically pay attention. They should not be able to basically say, okay, I don't want to see this, or I don't have time for this, or you know what, this is not worth my time. So be so good they can't ignore you, right? Your solution should be so good that the interviewer should only have one option. And that option should be that you are hired, right? Your solution should be, if you really want the job, your solution should be truly good. And this basically relates to the second slide that was saying that the difference between something good and something really good is attention to detail, right? So you should pay attention to everything. So in your solution, everything should be done well. You should have good project design. You should have a good project structure. You should have good page objects. You should have good automated tests. You should have good locators, good dependency management, and good documentation. Everything should be really good, right? Because what's your goal? Your goal is to impress the interviewer. Your goal is to convince the interviewer with your code, with your solution, that you can basically do the job, right? And you want him to have no doubts that you can do the job. You want him, after he looks at your solution, to say, okay, he's the guy that I need. So we can take all of these things one by one. The first one would be the project design. The project that you will put together, the solution to the interviewing test, should not have just unit tests that implement the test case by calling Selenium WebDriver methods. So if your solution is basically you have a unit test, and in that unit test you have a lot of code that opens the site, checks if the page title is correct, checks if the URL is correct, find elements, click elements, type keywords into text boxes, get information from elements. So that's not what companies want to see. And if your solution looks like that, I don't think that you will have a lot of success with the interview. So if this is how your test looks like, I think that you can do much better because your interviewer expects much better, right? So your test should not include any Selenium WebDriver methods like get current URL, find elements, send keys, get text. None of these should be in here. And this is what the creator of the Selenium WebDriver framework says, right? If you have WebDriver APIs in your test methods, you are doing it wrong. And of course, WebDriver APIs means WebDriver objects, WebDriver methods. So you should not have any of those into your test methods. Since we are talking about the project design, the automation project should have multiple layers. And those layers are, you have the automated tests that would implement the test case. And then you would have actions. And then you have page objects. And you can have a test automation framework. And only at the bottom, you would have the Selenium WebDriver methods. So a good project design means that your project is organized in multiple layers, right? And the layers are clearly defined. So each layer works by calling the layer that is just below it. Each layer should only use the layer under it, and that means the automated test should rely on the actions, actions should rely on page objects should rely on automation framework, and only the automation framework should rely on the Selenium WebDriver library. So you have multiple layers, right? Automated tests layer number one, the top layer, underneath actions, underneath page objects, underneath your automation framework, and finally Selenium. And under Selenium, you will have the browser. So that's about the project design, right? It should have multiple layers. Now, speaking of automated tests, the automated tests should use, of course, a unit testing framework such as JUnit and TestNG because we are talking about Java. But then if we would talk about C#, then you could use NUnit or XUnit. And the automated tests should rely on test fixtures, which are the setup and tear down methods. That should prepare the automation environment and then clear the automation environment. Then the automated tests should have assertions, but they should not be polluted with like lots of assertions. Because if a test has a lot of assertions, it would be difficult to understand what exactly the test is testing. So the assertions should be there only for making verifications on the page under test. So if your test is about checking that results are on the results page, then you should only have assertions for that verification. If your test is about checking that a product can be added to the cart, then assertions should only be there for verifying that the product is added to the cart. The test should not include assertions that check that you can navigate from home page to other pages until you get to the page under test. Because if you do that, then you will have so many assertions and it will be difficult to understand which assertion is actually verifying the purpose of the test case and which assertions are just verifying the navigation. So it's important, of course, to verify that when you navigate from a page to another page, that navigation happens correctly. But these checks should not be done in the test. They should be done either in the actions or they should be done in the page objects because you want the test to be short and you want the test to be simple. assertions should have error messages. So error messages are optional in assertions, but then it's a good practice to specify the error message, because if one of the tests is failing, you want to figure out as quickly as possible what's the problem. And then the error messages should not be just something like product count is incorrect in the cart. The error message should be as descriptive as possible, and it should include expected value, actual value. So proper assertion error message, instead of being product count is incorrect in the cart, a better message could be expected product count 1, actual 0, right? Something like that, so that it's easy for you to understand right away what is the problem and what is the context of the problem. So make sure that error messages are added to the assertions, and make sure that the error message includes expected and actual values. The automated tests, they're basically code. They are methods, right? And then they should be short and simple, like any other method. And to keep them short and to keep them simple, any complicated code should be moved out of the tests, and the complicated code should be moved either to the actions or to page objects, as we will see shortly. So the tests should be simple and they should be short, and if possible, they should read as much as possible like English. They should not read like coding, because if they read like English, then you can show your tests to testers that don't have development skills. You can show your tests to business analysts, to business owners, to regular users, to Scrum Masters, to a lot of people that don't have automation or development skills. If your tests look like code, then only people that have coding knowledge will be able to read them. And there is another advantage of having tests that read like English. You can treat the tests like documentation. The automated tests, because they should be short and simple, they should not include Java statements, because this will increase the test complexity. So if you have tests that use if-else statements, try catch, looping statements like for, while, do while, switch, all of those should not be in the test. And the test should not include page objects either, because as soon as the tests include page objects, they will become very dependent on the user interface. So if you will have changes done in the user interface, the test will not work anymore. So no Java statements, no page objects. The automated test should work with actions, which are basically, as you will see, just classes that implement interaction logic. And then the actions should rely on the page objects to basically interact with the site elements. So in an automated test, you should just have actions. And this is how the Serenity BDD library implements automated tests. They use actions, and then the actions use the page objects, and the actions are used in the tests. So a typical test class would look like this. You have here an action, which is called buyer steps, and then which is instantiated in here in the setup method. And then in the test, you basically have something like buyer.opens homepage, buyer.searches for items containing books, and then assert that the buyer can see items related to books. So there are no page objects, right? Just the action object, and then the methods of that action class. No Java statements, no page objects. I mentioned already that the automated test should rely on actions. So actions are Java classes that implement the interaction logic. And they rely on the page objects for finding the elements in the page and for interacting with them. So in the page objects, you won't find a lot of logic. The page objects will basically do two things. They will find elements and they will interact with them, like click them, check them, select them, but that's about it. If you have additional logic, that additional logic should not be in the page objects, it should be in the actions. The interaction logic is implemented in step methods. So an action is a Java class with methods, and those methods are called step methods. The action classes do not know anything about how the interaction with the site happens. They just use the page objects. They don't know how those page objects work. The action class works mostly with page objects. And you can combine different action classes together. So this would be an action class that we used before, buyer steps, and it's using two page objects, home page and results page. In the constructor of the action class, the two page objects are instantiated. And then these are the step methods. Opens homepage basically relies on the open method from the homepage page object. And then searches for items containing a string, a keyword relies on the search for method from the homepage page object. And then see items related to, again, relies on methods from the results page object. So in here, you can have logic like this in the action class, but not in the page objects. The next layer would be the page objects. So page objects, they are classes, Java classes in our case, that implement the interaction with the elements of a page. Of course, you would have a page object typically for a page. Like you can have a page object class for home page, another page object class for results page, details page. All of these classes, they implement the interaction with the elements of a page, but they should not have business logic because the business logic is implemented in the upper layer in the action classes. The page object classes, you can create them for pages and you can create them for page components. So if you have a big results page that has search component, page size component, paging component, filtering component, sorting component, all of those components can be page classes, page object classes as well. The page objects only implement the interaction with the site elements, so they should be simple and they should be short because they should have no logic. The page object classes should include locators, they should include methods that find elements, methods that get elements info, and methods that interact with elements, but no logic. And a simple page object class, homepage, so it has two locators. And then in here, it just has a method that basically implements the search. And that's about it. Page object methods, of course, should use synchronization when finding elements because synchronization is mandatory when you write automated tests. Sometimes the site may be slow, very slow, or fast, right? And then if synchronization is not used, then the code will only work when the site is fast. Using synchronization means explicit waits and expected conditions, no thread.sleep, and no implicit waits. So code like this should basically be used. Create first a WebDriver wait object with a timeout of 30 seconds. And after that, find the label web element using the wait that will keep checking if the element matched by the locator is visible for up to 30 seconds. And then if the element is found and its status is that it's visible, then the element will be returned. And then the next line can basically get the text of the label. It's a good idea to have locators inside of the page object classes. Like don't keep them into locator classes on property or property files. both of these techniques are bad practices. For locators, which are used in the page objects, a good locator means a locator by ID or a locator by name. And of course, that's implying that the ID or the name are static. They don't have dynamic values. But then if it's not possible to create a locator by ID or by name, XPath or CSS locators should be used. The XPath locator should be short. The CSS locator should be short as well. And then it's a good idea to avoid weak locators that select elements by index. So if your locator is trying to get the 5th element in a list, that's not a great locator. Or if your locator is trying to find an element based the text value of the element, that's not great as well, because what if the site works in multiple languages? If your locator is trying to find an element by the position of the element, by going through different elements, that's not good as well, because what if the order of those elements will be changed? And finally, if you are using XPath locators, any locator that is using functions, it is probably not the best one that you can find. Page object model is just one of the models that you can use in your solution for the coding test. There are some other models. Page Factory is probably something that you don't want to use because it's going to be deprecated. And it's going to be deprecated just because its implementation is extremely complicated. It depends on some concepts that will not be supported anymore in C#. So no Page Factory. But then there are some other things like loadable component and slow loadable component, which are extremely useful. Loadable component can help your code to load the page through its parent. And the parent is basically the page that was displayed before the current page. And slow loadable component is a model that is very similar with loadable component. It's very useful for very slow pages. And this is how loadable component can be used. So in the test class, you can have a variable for the home page, one for the results page, and one for the details page. And then in your setup fixture, you basically instantiate the home page object, then you instantiate the results page object, and then you pass the home page as a parameter here, because the home page would be the parent of the results page. And then the details page object, when it is instantiated, it gets a parameter, the results page, because results page it is its parent. So homepage is the parent of results page, and results page is the parent of details page. And because of these relationships, you can basically have the test looking like details page.load, and then on details page, add the product to on hold list, and then just check that the on hold count is 1. So there is no navigation, there is no opening of homepage, there is no searching on homepage to go to results page, there is no checking if results page is displayed, there is no going from results page to details page. All of those things are happening inside of each page object class. So you can basically have your test starting with loading the page under test, like the page where you want to verify something. And that's basically something that can be done with the loadable component model. So don't just use the page object model. There are some other models that can be used. Your solution is, of course, all about code, right? You have to write the code for the tests. You have to write code for the action classes. You have to write code for the page objects. All of this code has to be good. And what's good code? So classes should have a single purpose. Like you should not have huge classes that do a lot of things. Methods should have a single purpose. You should not use static variables and methods. You should program to an interface. You should use good names for variables, for methods, for classes. You should make sure that classes have good cohesion, meaning that all of the methods kind of like are related to a similar purpose. And then make sure that that line is duplicated. Avoid comments. Your code should be so clear that you don't need to add any comments, unless there are some special cases that are not obvious. The code complexity should be kept low. You should have no utility classes. You should have no code duplication. Avoid implementing things that already exist by yourself. And there are many other things that can be added here when we talk about good code. And that's a lot, right? I mean, I already discussed about so many things that you should cover into your test. You should cover project design, so you should have a design that is consisting in multiple layers, and then a lot of care should be related to the automated tests, and then the action classes should be well done. Because they should have the interaction logic, and then the page objects should be well done. Like make sure they don't have any logic inside of them. Make sure that they use synchronization and locator. So it's a lot of things, right? And including good code, writing good code. So is this sufficient?
Alex, I think we have a question here from Sergey. So I'm just going to unmute you, Sergey, so you can ask.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Hello? Sorry?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. Alex, I'm very curious if you can help us with avoiding test duplication.
Mm-hmm.
And also, how do you split large page object classes into small classes? I'm curious about inheritance. Is small object classes inherit the main page, the big page object class, or how do you implement this?
So if you have a big, if you have a big page object class,
thank you.
What you should do is you should basically break it down into smaller page object classes. So the simpler example that I can give you is, imagine that you have the results page of bestbuy.ca. That's a page with so many elements, right? So many components. You have on top the search component, you have on the left the filters, you have then a small component that shows you on what page you are and what's the total result count. Then you have paging components, two of them. So you can go to the next page, and then you have a sorting component, and then you have page size, where you can select that you want 15, 50, 100 results per page. And then in the middle of the page, you have basically the results, right?
Right.
So if you put all of this inside of one page object class, that page object class will have thousands of lines of code.
Exactly.
And then instead of doing that, what you should do is you should have a page object class for the filters that only implements filters, right? It should have locators for the filters and methods that work with filters. Then you should have another page object class that works for paging. So it should only have locators for paging, and then methods that implement the paging, going to next page, to a specific page, to previous page, to last page. Then you can have a page object class for the sorting component that will only implement the sorting functionality. So it should have locators for sorting and methods that change the sort order. So each component should basically have its own page class. And because of that, the results page object class should basically have no code. Instead, it should use objects for the smaller page object classes. So you should not do inheritance. Instead, you should use composition. So you should basically look at a way of saying results page class is basically made of filters, paging, sorting, page size, results, and other things.
For example, when you do filtering and finally you are clicking submit button on filter,
Yeah.
what should object return? It's returning results page or it's returning filter page?
So,
Or it's returning search page? How do you resolve this?
if you do, so if you have a method that is doing the filtering,
Yes.
that method should basically just select a filter and that's about it.
Select and submit, right?
Select and submit, and that's it.
What method should return?
It should not return anything. It should not return an object. Because again, if you do the filtering, I don't think it's a good idea that you, after you do the filtering, if you return the results page. I think because as I discussed before, right? So page objects should not have logic, right? Page objects should basically allow you to find elements. It should allow, and they should allow you to interact with elements. If you want to basically add logic, then do that in action classes. So you can have an action class where you basically use the page object for filters, and you can use the page object for results, and you can use other page objects. And in here, you can basically start making, start implementing logic like filter and then verify that so let's say before filtering, you basically get the page count, filter, get the page count again, verify that the page count goes down, right?
Yes, but after submitting filtering, you are getting refreshed page with new elements. So basically you have to trigger page object initialization again to pick up all elements.
Yeah,
right?
and you can do that. So you should not
So
implement all of this logic like did the page refreshed, am I seeing new results, am I seeing less results inside of the page object. I think you should do that into the layer above page objects, which should be actions.
mhm. Okay, I hope I will see some test code from this presentation. Maybe I'm gonna find it.
I don't think that that there is much about that in this presentation, but then if you want to see how page objects can be done for pages and for page components,
Yeah.
I have an ebook on Amazon about about automation patterns, and I believe that this topic is explained well over there.
Okay, thank you. I will take a look.
So send me an email and I can send you the link.
Sure. The second question was about avoiding code in tests, code duplication in tests. How do you avoid code
So
duplication in tests?
when you say code duplication, what do you mean? Can you give me an example?
For example, one class has two test cases with similar test steps.
Yeah.
How to avoid test duplication in both tests?
So for example, I mentioned the loadable component, right? So the loadable component allows you, let's assume that you want to write tests for the details page of bestbuy.ca.
Okay.
So you have a test that verifies that when you click add to cart, the product is added to the cart. And then let's say you have another test that verifies that when you click on the details page reserve in store, then you go to the reserve in store page, right? So both tests are about the details page, but one of them is about checking that add to cart button works. The other one is about checking that reserve in store button works. Now, you could basically have both tests starting with open homepage, search in the homepage, go to results page, select a product, go to details page. So this part would be common for both of them, right?
Right.
And then, but then if you implement the loadable component, then both tests can basically start with details page.load, right? So all of that navigation from homepage to details page is basically hidden, and it's not explicit. The tests will both start with open details page, right? So that's a way of reducing duplication.
Mm-hmm.
Another way is, using the action classes allows you to shorten the tests, because so if you have page objects in the tests tend to become very, very long. But then if you implement action classes above the page objects, tests tend to become short.
All right.
So those are two ways. And again, the loadable component is explained well in the same ebook that I mentioned before, if you want to see how you can implement it with like plenty of code.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
Okay. More questions?
I think we're good to continue. Oh,
Okay.
I think there's another question here. I'm just gonna unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay,
Chong?
Alex, Chong speaking.
Hey.
So I know that you kind of mentioned that in the past, like you kind of emphasized that you need to have like 1 or 2 assertions per test. But there are some situations that we need to verify that we want to make sure multiple key components display. So in that particular situation, like we need to have a multiple assertion. So what is your recommendation like in this kind of case?
So is that the purpose of the test case, to verify that those components are displayed?
Yeah, we have many issues that those components don't display, like those key components. That's the kind of one of the issues that we're having. So I'm kind of see like this kind of situation, maybe we need to have multiple assertion to test. Just what I want to know when your thoughts.
So, sometimes I agree. Sometimes it's hard to have just one assertion or 2 assertions, because again, what you validate is not exactly simple. I think that the rule to follow is to try to keep the number of assertions in the test as low as possible, and then the assertions that you really have in the test should only be about the purpose of the test case. They should not be about did the test navigated properly from page 1 to page 2, and from page 2 to page 3, and from page 3 to page 4, right? So those type of assertions, I don't think they should be in the test. But then if on the final page you need to validate more than one thing, I think it's fine to have more than one assertion, but still try to keep the number as low as possible.
Okay, sure, thanks. And another one is like, do you have any? I know that you kind of briefly mentioned about how action class should be done.
Yeah.
Do you have any good resource or kind of more detail about action class kind of?
Yeah. So I will most probably tomorrow. I hope I will be able to do this. I will publish the slides as a blog, and then in that blog I will include multiple links where you can basically see more about how you can create the tests that rely on actions, and actions that rely on page objects. So just wait until I will share that article, and then you can check those links.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
I don't see any other questions. Any other questions right now? Nope, doesn't look like it.
Okay. So should we stop at this point? Is this enough to cover in the Selenium coding exercise? And again, we should basically go back and try to remember that our goal is to impress the interviewer, right? If you really want the job, really want the job, then you should basically do your best. So the interviewer will be so pleased that he will basically want to hire you right away. So again, come back to this. Be so good I can't ignore you, right? Like your solution should be so good that the guy that looks at it should be pleased, and then he should basically say, yes, I really want this. And he should be surprised by how much thought and how much work you put into it, right? By your attention to detail, by the fact that you maybe did more than other people, you did more than he expected, right? So if you have time, do more than just have a good project design, have good automated tests, good actions, good page objects, synchronization, good locators, good code. So since we are speaking about Java solutions, manage dependencies with Maven. Any good automation project uses Maven for managing dependencies. And Maven provides also a good project structure, right? You will have the SRC folder and you will have the target folder. And then inside of the SRC folder, you will have a folder for the framework and another one for the tests. So implementing Maven, converting your project to a Maven project will give you a good project structure, and it will manage dependencies through the XML file, and then it should also give you the ability of running the code from command prompt. So absolutely do this if you have the time. Create a minimal framework, again, if you have the time, right? Why not? You want to impress the interviewer, so impress him. But then again, if you do not know how to do this, then skip it. It's better not to do it if you are not sure how. But if you've done this before, it's a good idea, because that's what the company will need from you anyways. So what should that minimal framework be? Maybe you want to have a custom driver that will use synchronization when finding elements. Maybe you want to create some HTML classes. So let's say instead of using web element for all of the variables, maybe you want to have a button class. Maybe you want to have a link class. Maybe you want to have a text box class. You can have code that takes screenshots on failure and exception automatically. You can have classes that generate random data. You can have classes that read settings from property files. Anything that you may think of, just put them into this small framework. Why not include a README file, right? So if some things are not obvious in the project, explain them in the README file. Explain in the README file, okay, if I will be hired, this is what I would do next. Explain how tests can be executed in command prompt, and provide any other information that you want that the company may find useful. Finally, have the code into an Azure Devops repo. So let's say you came up to this point, and then you have the project ready for review. How do you share it with your interviewer? Don't send it by email. And then don't send it as a Dropbox URL. Instead, since Azure DevOps is free to use for everyone, add the code to an Azure DevOps repo, something like this, right? And then, since the code is in the repo, create a quick pipeline that runs the test. Again, you can do this for free. And then run the pipeline a few times successfully, just to validate that your code really works. And that's like a sample pipeline that will run some Maven tests for a project. You can see here the task is Maven. It's using a Windows agent. The POM file is pom.xml, Java version 1.8, and then the Maven command is clean test. And then run it a few times, so you are sure that it works. And then at this point, send to your interviewer the Azure Devops project URL, because they have everything that they need in that project. They can see the code, they can see the pipeline, they can see the test execution results, right? Seeing the test execution results basically means that whatever you did works, which is an extra step that I think you should take, because otherwise, how will your interviewer know that your code really works? Do you expect him to basically install your project and then run it? No. So just giving him the URL of the project provides him everything that he needs, the code, the pipeline, and then the assurance that the code actually works, and he can run it by himself as well. Is it worth it to put so much effort into this coding test? I mean, that's up to you. If you really want the job, I think it is. And you should keep in mind you are not the only candidate, right? So the better your project is, the more chances you have. Since there are other people, you should basically, be so good so the interviewer cannot ignore you. You want to have a solution that exceeds his expectations and shows clearly that you are the person to be hired, right? Your solution should show that you have the skills, you have the experience, you can do it. And if the interviewer sees in your solution that you can do it, he will probably think, okay, if he can do this, then he can do whatever we need from him. And then that will basically lead to your success. And I think that's about it. Exactly 1 hour.
I think we have another question.
Yes.
So I'm just going to unmute Vic.
Yeah, sorry. I just comment about like what I had my own experience of passing the interview. They gave me 15 minutes. They gave me the page what I have to work with. Never saw that page before. And go ahead.
Yeah, that's pretty rare. I mean, for the Best Buy exercise that I mentioned before, they said that I can basically take a few days, and I took them. I basically worked, I believe, 3 or 4 days on this. And then for the Boeing test, same thing. They basically said, okay, you can take a few days to do it. The Boeing test was, however, weird in the sense that the test was, these are the rules of the bowling game, write code that implements it, right? So it was not Selenium test automation. It was just something else. So it's typically rare to basically say you have an hour, do it, because how much code can you write in an hour?
It's not even an hour. It's like they told at the beginning for 30 minutes, and after in total it will be like 15, 20 minutes. And I should just open like 2 elements, but still, on my own laptop, and it's like definitely not really comfortable what you're doing there. Because I used to have it like 2 screens at least, to work like in normal station. But again, like maybe bad luck, but that's what happened.
Yeah,
But in this case, what am I supposed to do? Just tell them about like, can you give me like a couple of days to complete that, or what to do with?
Well, do whatever they ask, but I don't think that's typical. I think the 1 hour test is usually about working on a simple Java exercise, like okay, how do you find duplicates inside of a list of strings, or how do you find out if a list that has brackets is well formed. Those are things that can be done in an hour, but to basically ask you to do UI test automation with Selenium in 1 hour, that's pretty rare, I think.
Okay, let's just count that as a rare and just bad luck.
I think bad
Thank you,
luck.
Alex.
Yeah, bad luck. Yeah.
All right, any other questions from anyone at all before we wrap up? I've got a Alex, you rock comment and a lot of thank yous. Any other questions from anyone? Or we can probably wrap up. All right, I don't think there's any other questions. Thank you so much, Alex, for presenting today. And I know you're always a favorite presenter amongst the VanQ group, so thank you. Before I pass it over to Shobit, he'll let you know who our presenter next month is. I did quickly want to say that Optimus, we are looking for two testers with 2 open positions right now, one for manual testing and one for test automation. We're looking for someone with about 4 to 5 years experience and specifically with API testing using Postman. There's more details on our website. If you are interested or know anyone else that is interested, you can either reach out to me or you can reach out to Vaibhav, who is our program manager. You can find our email on our website, or you can message me over VanQ. And I'll pass over to Shobit just to wrap up quickly.
Thanks, Jocelyn. So I would like to start with thanking Alex firstly. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time and presenting today. And also thanks to all the participants that joined us for this VanQ webinar. This has been recorded and we'll be posting it on the Meetup group, so you can always refer to it. Our next presentation, our next webinar, VanQ webinar, is going to be on May 28th, and our speaker is Lawrence, and he'll be presenting on observability-driven development with testing in production. So the event is now available for you to RSVP on Meetup, so you can go ahead, and I hope to see you all for the next VanQ.
Thank you.
Justly unmuted.
Thank you so much, everyone. We'll hopefully see you guys next month.
Thank you. Bye,
Right.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.